What up, son? I'm Leon, the Paperback Maniac, coming at you on a rare rainy ass night in Southern California. I swear I almost hydroplaned pulling into my parking lot this afternoon. The lot is a veritable lake right now. I can actually still hear it pitter pattering outside, but that's cool. I love the rain. So, anyway, coming at you with another vintage horror book review. Tonight we are taking a look at The Babysitter by Daniel Ransom. Daniel Ransom was the pen name of the late Ed Gorman, a writer who published in a multitude of genres throughout his life, finding success, I think, more with crime thrillers. He got to start writing horror in the mid 80s. He published some books with Zebra before then moving up in the world and publishing a couple with St. Martin's Press. And this was his second book with St. Martin's Press. Came out in 1989, and as you can see, has just an absolutely glorious cover. Just some amazing artwork, which when I first saw, 2 or 3 years ago, I knew I just had to own and read this book. It's a little point horror, a little V.C. Andrews, just really striking color contrasts there. But does it live up to the cover? That's the perennial question here, right, guys? So let's find out. I will begin by reading the synopsis as usual from the back cover. You're pleased to hear your little granddaughter has drawn a picture. Holding the drawing, you see the frightening image and fight back a clutch of fear. But you're only recalling a childhood memory, distorted into a nightmare by time and distance. You take your little granddaughter to the doctor for a checkup. She suddenly flies into a ravening frenzy, striking the doctor and slashing at your face. You can't believe it's happening, but there has to be a simple explanation for it. You invite the teenage babysitter into your home, into your living room. As you introduce your kids to her, you note her striking, disturbing beauty. As you get ready to go out to the car, the children begin to act a little strangely. It's just your imagination, you tell yourself. There's really nothing wrong. And then the full force of the ancient terror explodes across your senses. The Babysitter. So, this book concerns 49-year-old Jody, who has recently moved back to her hometown in the Midwest to help care for her 8-year-old granddaughter, Jenny, because her daughter, Sam, is a coke addict who's been going through a rough patch. So, Jenny, the little girl, has been acting a little strange lately, and this has got, both her mom, Sam, and the grandmother, Jody, concerned. So they take Sam to a psychologist, and, this shrink is, giving the little Jenny some word association, having her, he starts having her draw pictures of words that he says, like, happiness, fear. Actually, when he tells her to draw a picture associated with the word fear, she draws a very curious picture. She draws a picture of a creature with the head of a grasshopper and the body of like a woman. And this creature has a tube coming out from between its teeth. And then after she draws this picture, she starts to act really strange. Her face kind of twists up into this feral expression. Her eyes go scarlet. She starts frothing at the mouth. And when the shrink asks her, like, are you okay? She completely loses it and just goes apeshit in there, tossing items across the room. She attacks the psychologist. And obviously, this is very concerning. Now, Jody, the grandmother, is absolutely horrified when she sees this drawing that little Jenny had drawn of this insectoid creature with the grasshopper head, because it eerily reminds her of an incident that happened in the early 50s when she was a little girl. Basically, she had been taking her stroke-ridden grandfather in a wheelchair on a walk in the neighborhood, and as she had passed a classmate's house, she saw through the front window the silhouette of a creature, some sort of being with the head of a grasshopper and the body of a woman, with a thin sort of reed-like tube extending from its mouth and inserted into the body of her classmate, whose house this was. And she witnesses this, and her grandfather also witnesses this, and is absolutely horrified by this. Absolutely horrified. Even more strangely, after that incident had occurred, the girl who she had witnessed, was having this tube inserted into her by this creature, had started acting very strangely, and she had, done weird things, like she stole her father's car and got all drunk and smashed it through a plate glass window, or she tried to steal like some jewelry and then lashed out at the store owner, and culminating, of course, in her being caught eating the innards of a local neighborhood dog, just like wildly just eating like the insides of this dog. So very, very strange. And shortly thereafter, Jody's grandfather had passed away in his sleep, but in his hand they had found a picture he had drawn of what he and Jody had witnessed. This creature with the body of a woman and the head of a grasshopper and this tube coming out of its mouth. And that picture, which Jody then kept, is very, very similar to this picture that little Jenny drew in the psychologist's office. And Jenny will not answer any questions. She says that she's not supposed to talk about what recently happened. She's very cryptic. And eventually she disappears. She runs away. And Jody teams up with one of her old friends, a guy that she used to have a crush on, and they try to sort of find Jenny again and save her. And because they know that something terrible is happening here in this town. They don't know what. We learn that there have been a few other cases of local children, always girls, who start acting strangely and ultimately have complete mental breakdowns and actually have to be institutionalized. And so this does not bode well for little Jenny, and who knows where she is. And so, so yes, I guess that's all I'm going to really go into as far as the plot. The book, midway through, kind of becomes a missing child book when Jenny disappears and they go out looking for her, which kind of surprised me. One of the more disappointing aspects of this book is, despite being called The Babysitter and having a beautiful picture of a babysitter on the front cover, there is very little babysitting action going on in this book. In fact, the titular babysitter doesn't really feature in this book at all, and she doesn't really show up until the end, and even then doesn't really leave a huge lasting impression. So a little bit of a misnomer. I was kind of hoping for more of a story about an evil babysitter. I guess it kind of is one, but not in the way that you might expect. Also, the book, starts off following this Jody and her daughter Sam and then the missing granddaughter, and you think it's their story, but then once Jenny disappears about midway through, then it shifts to this other couple who have recently hired the babysitter, the titular babysitter, who, by the way, Jenny Jody and her daughter Sam, they're trying to find this babysitter because they do suspect that a babysitter who had recently looked after Jenny might be behind all this. But then it shifts to this other couple and their plight, and they do have a pretty a bad experience with because of this babysitter. But then it kind of goes, and I really don't like it when books sort of shift when you're with these characters and then suddenly it goes to like these other characters like way down the line in the book and then goes back to the other characters. But it wasn't too bad. Actually, the book is a little slower paced than I had imagined as well. We don't really get any sort of crazy scenes or gore or pulpy, fun violence until really the last quarter of the book, really not until the last 50 pages, but we do get some pretty fun and cool scenes in those last 50 pages, but it does take a little while to get there. But, this book, it is charming nonetheless. I did enjoy it. There are some delightfully dated references to, older, even before the time of this book. You can tell that Daniel Ransom was definitely sort of steeped in nostalgia when he wrote this book. There are references to, Grace Kelly and Robert Redford and some of the, probably the cultural icons that Ed Gorman grew up loving. And there are also, more modern references of the time to things like Donkey Kong and Madonna. But it's always interesting and fun to read a book that is drenched in the nostalgia of the author's time, just like now the nostalgia is for this time, the 80s, right? So that was fun. And the book, it does have some valiant attempts at characterization. Doesn't always hit the mark, but Jodie's friend who is trying to help her, he has sort of, I guess, a somewhat decent story. An embittered, drunken Cadillac dealer in the book, who's actually the other couple, the husband of the other couple that it shifts to, whose daughter is in danger from the babysitter. He has kind of a decent, somewhat of a decent, characterization. But, it's ultimately, at the end of the day, this is just a very, light fare. This is not a book that I'm probably going to remember much of in, 5 weeks. But, the writing is simple, straightforward, workmanlike. And, it's fine. I did get the impression sometimes when reading this book that the author, Ed Gorman, is a very sort of straight-laced, traditionalist, conservative guy. This is the kind of guy who I could just tell, did not understand the youth of the time. Just did not get, the idea of loud rock music and these kids with their ghetto blasters and the sordid, squalid city life, and these degenerates and a guy who's very homophobic and who it turns out is also very racist against Native Americans. Unfortunately, when we kind of get the when the story kind of comes into play, but what else is new, right? Those kinds of things, and the book is dedicated to Richard Lehman, I believe. So I don't know if Ed Gorman was buddies with Richard Lehman, but that's another guy who kind of strikes me when I read him as a very sort of traditionalist, conservative guy. But, that does not, of course, detract from my enjoyment of the book. It was fine. I didn't love this book, though. I think, as I said, if it had dealt more with the babysitter, if there was more babysitter in it, I would have been a little happier. But I did not hate it either. It was a totally passable book. Is fine. I would recommend you guys to get this if you could find it between $5 or $10. I probably wouldn't pay much more than that, but it is worth that. If for nothing other than this gorgeous cover. But yeah, The Babysitter by Daniel Ransom. Not the most glowing review, but it was not a bad time. It was a fun book, and I will definitely be reading more Daniel Ransom. I do have, I think, all of the horror books that he published up until maybe 91. I don't have some his later 90s books, but unfortunately, like a lot of the guys who started out writing horror during the time when it was popular, he later repudiated horror and all of these books and basically disowned them. But yeah, I will definitely be reading more Daniel Ransom because this was fun for what it was. So yeah, that's it, guys. That's the review. Hope you enjoyed watching it. Check back soon because I plan to have another book review. Hopefully it'll come a lot sooner. I don't want to have as many breaks in between. And of course, more collection updates and all that good stuff. So until then, guys, take it easy. I will see you later. Peace out.